From Lindsay and myself, I would like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas. Hope you're enjoying your day so far, and I'm delighted to say that I'm going to release the January outlook that was put together over the last few days. It is a bold forecast, that has to be said, everybody, but I'm feeling reasonably optimistic that this may play off fairly well based on the evidence that I'm seeing. And this forecast is not a wish cast, it's not hype, it's based purely on the various teleconnections that I often look at. And you know that I like the MJO, obviously looking at the polar vortex both within the stratosphere and the troposphere as well. And there is reason to be optimistic that we are going to see a fundamental hemisphere-wide pattern change as we step into the new year. So let's look at it. This is off weather. I was going to say Weather Bell. This is off markvoganweather.com. It's freely available for everybody. I will leave a link in the description below today's video. You can click on that and you can read it at your leisure in more detail. But we will go through this in a little bit of detail, providing the evidence to back up the ideas that I have. And that is something that I really stand by. I know that some folks are kind of saying one thing and another thing, but this is not me just looking at model runs, hour by hour and day by day and basing a forecast on that. It's purely, there's a lot of hard work, a lot of study, a lot of research being put into this in order to come up with these ideas. So the December forecast has turned out reasonably well. Yes, you could argue the point that I made mention of a potential cold spell towards the Christmas New Year period. We know that hasn't really materialized, but I did say that it would be a predominantly milder than average December and the first month of meteorological winter. The question is what goes on beyond this upcoming period here, this Christmas to New Year period. What is going to happen? Are we going to start to see winter coming back? The reason why I say coming back is we did see spells of winter during the month of November. It was likely one of the stronger cold spells that we've seen for the month of November since 2010. We also seen the most significant snow for the month of November here in the UK since 2010, albeit 2010 and 2024, there is zero comparison in terms of the level of cold and the amount of snow that covered pretty much the majority of mainland UK as well as Ireland. Also, we did not see that in 2024, but it is incidentally the coldest nights that we've seen in some 14 years for the time of the year. And also we've seen 4 straight nights, or not 4 straight nights, but we've seen 4 nights during the month of November below -10. You have to go back to 2016, the last time we've seen double digits below freezing during the month of November. We did see Storm Dara. There also was a system that followed that brought severe gales across northern UK as well. So mild and at times somewhat stormy. How do we go? Where do we go as we move into the month of January and 2025? So let's look at the article. December and the first of the 3 meteorological months has been mild across Ireland, UK and much of Europe. This is the temperature anomalies for the first 24 days of December here. So we obviously have a few days left to go, but generally speaking, it is pretty much steadfast and certain that we are going to see a warmer than average December overall. Where it stacks up with history will be interesting to see once the Met Office come up with their official numbers. But it was one of the warmest Decembers over the higher latitudes of Eurasia and North America, but also note the chill across Northern Africa, the Middle East, and through middle latitude Asia. Let's blow this up a little bit more so that it's easier to see, hopefully anyway. If you can watch this video on your TV, it would be a good thing because you can see a little bit clearer these graphics, even the writing also, as opposed to a tablet or a phone. It's always that bit more difficult to see when you're watching on a smaller device. So I always encourage folks to watch on their smart TV. if they possibly can. So you can see here for the month of December, it has been incredibly mild across northern portions of the Eurasian landmass, and then obviously across northern portions of North America. It's been very mild across Alaska and across the majority of Canada. Has been warm this December. Interesting how cold Greenland is, but that's your classic positive North Atlantic oscillation. North Atlantic oscillation when you've got a cold Greenland, you've got typically low heights over Greenland, and then you've got warm, basically a warm Europe. Often when you've got a cold Greenland, you've got a warm UK, Ireland, and Western Europe. Interesting enough, we've had quite a cold December over the eastern side of the United States. Now, the stratospheric polar vortex has been strong, but the tropospheric polar vortex has been somewhat weaker, and we've been seeing these intrusions of Arctic air into the central and eastern United States, while we've had shorter-lived and less severe cold into the west of Europe. So it's really been eastern North America that has been burn the brunt of any Arctic air into the middle altitude pattern. We have also seen quite a lot of cold over parts of Central Asia, the Middle East, and across China during the month of December. Moving on, and from a global perspective, we'll get to the global perspective in just a second. This is the last 7 days of December, and you can see here firmly warmer than average across UK, Ireland, and much of Central and Eastern and Northern Europe. Now, as we move towards the at times it's been stormy. I do apologise. At times it's been quite stormy, with Storm Dara causing significant impacts during the 6th and 7th of December, with the greatest impacts across England, Wales, and Ireland. It turned very wet and windy for more northern areas of the UK during the 14th and the 15th of December, with wind gusts in excess of 109 miles per hour Cairngorm, 83 South Uist, and 77 in Stornoway. Cold spells have been somewhat brief and relatively tame by early winter standards. I'll get to the point that I was going to say just a second ago, that for the year to date, it is a warmer than average theme across the bulk of not just Europe, but globally. But Iceland actually stands out as one of the colder places during the 2024 year, and there's very few places on that chart for the year to date globally that has been below average. Southwestern China and generally Iceland, possibly sub-Saharan Africa as well, has been close to average, but there is a tremendous amount of above average conditions across the face of the planet during the past 12 months or so that is coming quickly to an end. One of the few places on Earth, like I say, that has seen a below average was Iceland. Part of the cause for the milder than average at times and the stormy weather during the month of December is in part down to the rotation through the warm and somewhat stormy phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation. So those phases of 2 and 3, which is the Indian Ocean. So this is obviously the enhanced convection that increases rainfall and thunderstorm activity over a given area within the tropics. So phases 2 and 3 is over the Indian Ocean. Phases 4 and 5, again, warm phases, but that is when the enhanced convection is over the maritime continent, or Indonesia, to be precise, coinciding with a strengthening of the polar vortex. The below 90-day phase plot diagram shows this rotation commencing back around the 20th of November, with the full effects only kicking in during the close of the month of December. So we've seen the rotation, the beginning of these warm phases kicking in around the 20th of November, and then the effects of that MJO only really started to kick in as we stepped into the month of December. But you can see here that the purpley colours represent, and I know this is very difficult to see. This is why I encourage you to check out the written article. But for the month of September anyway, you can see here the purple colours. So we've seen the rotation through phases 7 into 8. And then the light green colour represents October. We've seen that the rotation through out of phases 1 into 2 and 3. Then it went into the null phase and then established over phases 5 and 6 during the month of October. We've seen a lot of blocking. We've seen extreme rainfall late September into October when these phases passed through. The last rotation through the cold phases of 7 and 8 happened late October into early November, with the atmosphere roughly 10 to 14 days response afterwards. The MJO and the AO-NAO have both very nicely reflected each other through autumn, as can be seen in the below graphic. So in essence, the positive Arctic oscillation bottles the cold up over the Arctic, and it allows the middle latitudes to get flooded by both Pacific as well as Atlantic air, meaning milder than average conditions. When you're in phases 3, 4, and 5, the Arctic oscillation has been generally positive. Once they go into the phases 7, 8, and 1, we've seen that back half of September, first half of October. We've seen the negative Arctic oscillation, so the release of Arctic air into the middle latitudes. Then we've seen the return of phases 3, 4, and 5, strong positive Arctic oscillation, then back into the cold phases of 7, 8, and 1, and we've seen a particular cold spell during the month of November with the snowiest conditions for the time of year in 14 years for the UK. Prolonged cold spell in January. We are likely to see the return of phase 7 in the coming 10 to 15 days. This is quite an interesting one, as can be seen in the below GFS ensemble diagram. So you can see that we are in phase 6 at the moment. It heads into the null phase according to the GFS ensemble, and then actually becomes reasonably amplified in phase 7. So that's the enhanced convection moving into the deeper into the West Pacific, pulling away from the maritime continent, which tends to favour milder conditions. The ECMWF equally sees that amplification into the cold phase of 7. Moving forward, both the NAO and the AO in particular are trending negative. So therefore, the negative means that you tend to see blocking higher pressure up into the Arctic region over the high latitudes, and then you start to see colder conditions and lower pressure down into the mid-latitude pattern. We essentially have the opposite at the moment, where we're strong positive Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation. We've got a lot of the cold bottled up over the Arctic. That's been allowing the polar vortex to become stronger. But we are expecting, with that amplification in phase 7 of the MJO, a kick to the atmosphere, change taking place, and the reversal in the height field up into the Arctic region itself. So the NAO, as can be seen here, trending negative, but even more so, the Arctic oscillation is going from slightly positive to fairly deep negative as we move into the New Year period here. The question mark is, where does this pattern truly set up? Even if you get a strong block over the Arctic region, it doesn't mean to say that you're guaranteed cold and snow in western areas of Europe, including UK and Ireland here. So that's something that we need to pay close attention to. But this is me giving you the reasons, the backing, the evidence to support what I'm saying. The model is seeing the building of heights into the Arctic following the initial low height field over Arctic and Greenland, which mirrors, so the lowest portion of the stratosphere at 50 millibars is very nicely reflecting in the 500 millibar pattern underneath it. So the lower stratosphere versus the troposphere, when they line up, you tend to see quite a nice mirror image between strat and trope. And you can see that quite nicely in the initial 50 millibar level. Looking down over the Arctic region, you've got a lot of low heights over the Arctic, Greenland, and positive heights over North America and over Europe. This is the mild conditions that we've got at the moment between Christmas and New Year, and we've got a lot of cold bundled up over the Arctic region. And if you look at the 500 millibar pattern, it's very similar to the 50 millibar pattern over the top. So you can see that here, low heights Greenland and the Arctic, positive heights over North America and Europe, providing a very mild pattern. And then when you've got the two height fields matching up with one another, both at 50 millibars and 500 millibars, essentially they reinforce why the pattern is becoming so mild through the mid latitudes during the Christmas period itself. So you can see very, very warm conditions over North America compared to average. Look at the top of Europe, Asia. We've got warmer than average anomalies here, including UK and Ireland. So let's move forward here. I've talked about the heights, both within the lower stratosphere and the troposphere mirror image, but the polar vortex has been somewhat decoupled through much of December with an ever strengthening stratospheric polar vortex, but a weaker polar vortex. Weaker the winds, the more chance that cold can get released from Arctic towards the mid latitudes here. So I've seen the strengthening of the PV over the upper levels of the strat, but a weaker polar vortex within the troposphere, hence the cross-polar flow and Arctic intrusions into North America. But in the below vertical cross-section, this shows increasingly cold upper levels propagating downwards into the lower stratosphere, and this is forcing the tightening of the tropospheric polar vortex. So the tropospheric polar vortex has been reasonably weak, but it is now starting to strengthen as we start to couple stratosphere at the top into the lower portions of the stratosphere. Then that has influence underneath it. This drives an increasingly mild Europe, North America and Asia between Christmas and New Year as seen above. The record strong mean zonal winds at 10 millibars at 60 degrees north is very evident. So basically the thin red line is record strong mean zonal winds. The thick red line in the middle is the average, and the thin red line at the bottom is record weak territory. Look at how strong these winds are at the moment. They're at record breaking levels by quite a margin. But look at the deceleration in these winds generally towards the new year and through the first week of January. We see this sharp drop off in the mean zonal wind. And I've said this for many times now already. Why is that the case? It's likely because we're going to start to see blocking higher pressure starting to re-establish over the Arctic region. That then creates a heat flux from troposphere up into the stratosphere and creating a drag within the stratospheric circulation. You start to then create that drag. It's like holding a bike wheel that's moving. If you start to touch that, it then slows down the momentum. And it's the same idea in a simplistic form. It's the same idea within the atmosphere when you start to build and bulge the troposphere. The troposphere is at its thinnest over the pole. It's at its thickest over the equator. But once you start to build the pressure, you then start to thicken the depth of the atmosphere over the Arctic region within the troposphere. That then bulges up like mountains sticking up, creates a drag within the stratospheric circulation, and therefore we start to see these waves developing. These waves are warm air that is then starting to disrupt the structure as well as the strength of the polar vortex. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But notice that we're seeing that this cold building over the upper levels of the stratosphere, that's then propagating down into the lower portions of the strat, into the upper troposphere, and we're seeing the response taking place with a strengthening of the polar vortex itself. Now, the GFS ensemble polar cap height projection has been indicating that the polar vortex was going to strengthen during the month of December, as can be seen here. It's a graphic here of the polar cap height from Dr. Judah Cohen, based in Boston, Massachusetts. So change is likely, but when? So we've given the reasons why. MJO phase 7 is going to start to change the synoptic pattern over the entire northern hemisphere, reversion from low heights to positive heights. Therefore, that then should start to change the profile within the polar vortex, both in the troposphere as well as the stratosphere. With the aid of tropical forcing, high latitude blocking is set to re-establish itself over the high latitudes, and this should drive upward heat flux, kicking off wave breaking from trope into the strat, which decelerates the mean zonal wind through the stratosphere itself. Notice the flip. Notice the flip in the height field over the Arctic. Upcoming 7 days, very mild. North America and Europe here, low heights over Greenland, up into the Arctic region. This is the upcoming 7 days, by the way, which takes us towards the days leading up to the new year. This is the day 7 through 14. Look at the heights now starting to build up into North America, the Baffin Straits, and also Greenland. Look at the change here of the GFS ensemble between the upcoming 7 low heights, as you can see here, the strong heights over eastern North America. Notice how they start to move northwards, and then in the day 14 through 21, very different story altogether. We're starting to see the blocking now over the North Atlantic, extending into Greenland, up into the Arctic region. Look at all the low heights. So we'll lose the positives over the middle altitudes and replaced by low heights, and we're seeing low heights over the Arctic replaced by high heights. That is what causes the polar vortex to then weaken, and therefore we could start to see bitterly cold Arctic air that has been building over the last few weeks. You strengthen the polar vortex, you're strengthening the core, the reservoir of bitterly cold air. But once you start to disrupt that, that then gets released southwards. This is the period now all the way day 21 through 28. This is Monday the 13th through the 20th of January. And that is a classic cold, blocky, negative AO, NAO pattern for the period. Middle of January looks very interesting off the GFS ensemble, with the trough over eastern North America and over Europe here. And then with the positive extending from fairly low latitudes over the North Atlantic all the way up to the Arctic, you're shutting down the mild Atlantic flow. This is obviously a 7-day mean, so there is some adjustments, there is some fluctuations, but the general synoptic pattern is turning on its head over the next couple of weeks. Very interesting. So another aspect to consider is how cold. If we get the right ridge trough set up here in northwest Europe, in other words, the block west of Ireland extending up through Greenland, which cuts off the Atlantic and holds more north or northeasterly flow. The build-up of cold within the Arctic is courtesy of a strong PV, which could mean stronger cold released south. How strong and how long is the question. Certainly the GFS ensemble holds the blocking within the Arctic and Greenland for most of January. So this could be a prolonged, if it does happen, because we still don't know if it's guaranteed yet. If this does happen, there is model indication that this could be a fairly long-lived event. But it really depends on a few aspects here. But most of January, which would provide a lengthy drag on the stratospheric circulation, which the ECMWF suggests when looking again at the mean zonal wind. So let's look at the mean zonal wind once again. And you can see here that once it goes from record strong back towards slightly negative values, so slightly below average strength, there is a little bit of an uptick in the mean zonal winds according to the ensemble mean. So that's the run of all the members. But then there's a prolonged period in the mean that suggests that the stratospheric circulation is reasonably weak through the majority of January, which is interesting. That then would indicate, that's what would make sense, the prolonged blockiness over the Arctic region, prolonged weak mean zonal winds within the polar vortex. They kind of go hand in hand. So I suspect a lot depends upon how strong the MJO gets in phase 7 and where it goes after that. A collapse in phase 7 could support a longer-lived blocky setup and colder, but I shall lean more towards milder, perhaps from about the 20th onwards. So I'm kind of saying that I think the first 20 days of January is looking reasonably cold, and we could have a significant cold spell within that period. But some fluctuation between cold and something milder is possible as well, even within the overall mild, overall cold setup. So look at this here. This is off the GFS ensemble, which carries the cold signal for us here in Western Europe pretty much all the way through till the end of January. So you can see here day 1 through 7, warmer than average. So we end December in 2024 on a mild note. Then as we go into the 7 to 14 day, we start to see the change. Look at Iceland, bitterly cold conditions here for that 7 to 14 day period. So this is, look at the dates. This is the period between Monday 30th of December, Monday the 6th of January. So week 1 turns colder according to the ensemble. Into the day 14 through 21, this is the period Monday the 6th through the 13th, colder than average. UK, Ireland, and a good chunk of Central and Western Europe, if you notice here, including Scandinavia. Then as we continue to go forward here, day 21 through 28, this is the period now this is actually day 23 through 30, in fact. That is wrong, in fact. Sorry, Tuesday 22nd of October, 29th of October. That is not correct. Sorry about that. I'm going to need to fix that one. But generally speaking, the modelling is indicating the cold persists. Look at this here, day 28 through 35, Monday the 20th of January through 27th is still below average. This is taking us out to the end of January. And here is the upcoming 35-day temperature anomaly for Europe. We've got average to slightly below average across parts of the UK, flirting with something milder on the west coast. But if these weeklies are correct, then I would suspect we're slightly below average in terms of the UK for the month of January as a whole. So what's my verdict for the month of January? I think you probably know already based on what I've said. Average to slightly colder than average and drier than average for January for Western and Northwestern Europe, including UK and Ireland, warmer than average for Eastern Europe. So in essence, we've got a mild pattern at the moment, but that looks as if it's going to change. Now, the ECM weeklies also support the GFS ensemble. So if we play through here, this is the upcoming 7-day period, warmer than average. We're pretty confident that it's going to be a warmer than average remainder of December with a flirt with something colder going into next week. Then as we move towards the day 7 through 14, below average for the UK and Ireland here. So this is the first near the first end of week 1 of January. Central and Eastern Europe is warmer than average. Western Europe is colder than average. Then as we continue to play through into the day 14 through 21, we're flirting with something slightly milder, especially into Ireland and Northern Ireland, but still the UK, the majority of mainland UK is average to slightly below average. This is the Monday 6th through Monday the 13th of January. So again, this is the ECM weeklies. We've just seen the GFS ensembles, and both models indicate the same type of idea, with blocking to the west, up into Greenland, up into the Arctic region, allowing colder into the trough that is established over Europe and over Eastern North America. Continue to play it right the way through. You can still see this cold signal showing up. So pretty much I'm predicting a colder than average January after what was successfully a warmer than average December. And this is based purely on various factors, including the Mann-Julian oscillation, which is heading into the cold phases. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope if you're looking for cold, it gives you some reason to be optimistic. We shall wait and see what happens. Like I say, this is a relatively bold idea, but it's based on various evidence that I'm seeing. We'll wait and see what happens. Maybe it'll not happen. Maybe it will happen. We'll wait and see. But I hope you all have a wonderful and safe and enjoyable, blessed Christmas. And I will hopefully be back tomorrow, Boxing Day, with more on this potential coming of cold. Have a wonderful Christmas day. See you hopefully tomorrow with more. Bye for now.